Chuck began Breakpoint in order to help Christians think Christianly about everything from embryo-destructive research and animal rights to art, marriage, music, and Darwinism. He enjoyed few things more than his monthly meetings with his team of writers, who worked with him on Breakpoint radio scripts and on his Jubilee and Christianity Today columns. He always came into the second-floor conference room smiling, asking in his booming voice how we were, moving around the big table to shake hands with us and ask how our kids were doing. After a prayer, Chuck was eager to hear our ideas for what he could talk about on the radio and write about in his columns. He enjoyed the sometimes boisterous intellectual debates. He never wanted anyone to be a yes man or yes woman, and he relished attacking any flaws in our reasoning, whether the subject was the latest film, a new book, something the current U.S. president had said, or what various special interest groups were up to. Animal rights lobbyists, in particular, drove Chuck crazy. He always wanted to comment on the latest uproar, such as the time the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals claimed Jesus was a vegetarian. Chuck's writers would often email around the latest story in which one celebrity or other announced that animals had the same value as people, if not more, and that a law ought to be passed to that effect. But we did our best to keep them away from Chuck, lest we find ourselves drafting yet another script on the subject. Chuck frequently came to our meetings with fresh stories from his travels around the world, a chance encounter, perhaps at an airport, with someone who had read one of his books and recognized the figure in the neat suit and big black-framed glasses. He couldn't wait to tell us about a conversation he'd had with a prison inmate in a developing country or an atheistic political leader he'd encountered in Eastern Europe and with whom he'd shared the gospel. If Chuck came with a breakpoint idea between monthly meetings, often sparked by something he'd read in the New York Times, he'd dictate his thoughts on a tape recorder, which one of his assistants transcribed and sent to us on bright orange paper, which we irreverently labeled orangegrams. We would cut them down, shape them up, perhaps rearrange the thoughts for clarity, and insert an idea or two that he might have overlooked. Occasionally, if the writers agreed the idea was not one of Chuck's best, the orangegram would quietly disappear. At the next recording session, we'd simply hand him other scripts we thought were better. This strategy of selective amnesia often worked for weeks, and then he would suddenly turn to one of us and say, "Whatever happened to that script about?" But he was so busy and so prolific that he often forgot about many of his script ideas or simply wanted to move on to a new idea, as he put it in his Boston accent. It wasn't unusual for Chuck to want a script right now, unless he changed his mind, of course. My colleague Roberta Rivera complained, only half-jokingly, that Chuck had given him attention deficit disorder with his habit of asking for a particular script and then calling back an hour later to say, "Stop working on that script and send me this script instead, right away." During the years I was managing editor of Breakpoint, Chuck would occasionally call me at home to dictate something straight out of that afternoon's news reports, something he wanted to broadcast the following day. This meant I sometimes had to compose a script for him in less than an hour to make the early evening recording deadline, fending off my children's complaints that they were hungry, and when were they going to have dinner. Several of his writers worked for Chuck for so long that we knew exactly what he would want to say about a particular issue. He was, after all, a good teacher. But one of my colleagues told me it was a bit creepy that I could even insert Chuck's ad-libs for him. Over the years, we tried hard to draw Chuck away from politically oriented scripts, to do more worldview-related scripts on art, music, and science. But he loved politics and found it hard to resist the temptation to comment on everything going on in Washington.